everyone, my name is Alyssa, and as Jack and Lauren alluded to earlier today, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about how ants can help us and ant collectives can help us learn about the emergence principle, and then also about how ants can help us think about our own human behavior. And so the title of my talk is Emergent Communities, What We Can Learn About Cooperation. And there are thousands of species of ants in the world, so to help you guys wrap your head around this, I'm just going to be talking today specifically about the leafcutter ant. That's for two reasons. First of all, they're really, really cool. So in the video that you're going to be watching here, you'll see as the ants are going out and looking for leaves, and this is because the ants are the only known species of non-human known to farm, and they practice agriculture by going out, cutting up these leaves, bringing them back to their underground colony, and chewing up the pieces for their fungus garden. And then the ants subside in the fungus garden. They also eat the pieces of the fungus. So you can see here them cutting up the pieces. The white part there is the fungus. And little microbes in their mouth will help break down the leaves for the fungus to digest. The other reason that I am talking about the leafcutter ants is because if you are feeling so inspired by my talk today, you can actually visit them for yourselves. They are at the Peabody Museum in New Haven, Connecticut. So I think the easiest way to think about the leafcutter ants and why their society is able to subsist is by thinking about the way that that type of social system is organized. So there are three simple rules that govern how eusociality works, and eusociality is just the highest level of social organization of any animal society. And I'm going to go over all three rules, and then I'll go into each one in detail. So the first is overlapping generations. The second is division of labor into reproductive and non-reproductive parts. And the third is the cooperative care of offspring. So the first is overlapping generations. And when we're talking specifically about this species of leafcutter ants colony, there are a couple different types of ants in the colony, and the first is the queen, and she can live up to 20 years. That's that large ant. You can only see her head in the top of the page. Each of her worker or daughter ants can only live 1 to 2 years. So you can imagine if we were to play through the scenario, on day 1, the queen, who can lay up to 1,000 eggs a day, might lay just that, up to 1,000 eggs on day 1. On day 2, the eggs would hatch, and she'd have 1,000 worker ants. And over time, across a year and a half, and then by 2 years, she would have no worker ants left to do the work of the colony. So what actually happens is that on day 1, the queen lays 1,000 eggs. On day 2, they hatch. On day 2, she lays another 1,000 eggs. And this keeps going all the way to it just keeps going. And this makes sense in human societies too. If a person started as a child and grew up through their life without being able to share any of their knowledge, it would be all the work that they had done during their life would be lost. And we can think about cumulative culture and what we learned from our ancestors and our parents and our grandparents, and it helps to explain how we're able to pass these things on from generation to generation. The second rule that I like to talk about is division of labor into reproductive and non-reproductive parts. And just for scale, if you were to put a quarter in your hand, that's about the size of the queen ant. So within the ant colony, there are 2 types of ants in the reproductive caste, and that's the male ant here on the right. His only job is to mate with the queen once, and then he actually dies. And then there's also the queen ant, and as we mentioned earlier, she lays eggs for her entire life, and that can be up to 20 years. The other side of the colony here are the bulk of the individuals in the group, and that's the non-reproductive caste. And they have jobs depending on their size. So the large ant that always catches everyone's attention is the soldier ant. She's a female, and her job is to protect the colony from other invading colonies, predators, even other ants of the same species. They're also the foragers and excavators, so they dig the nest site, and they also go out and find the leaves. And then lastly, the gardeners and the nurses, and their job is to tend to the fungus garden and to take care of the baby ants. Again, if we draw this back to human society, this makes sense. If you were trying to build a house, you wouldn't want everyone trying to do the carpentry, because you never get everything done. Last simple rule that helps explain how ant colonies are able to live is the cooperative care of offspring. And to do this, I'm going to have to talk a little bit about genetics. So in a human, humans are considered a diploid organism, so that's just an organism that has 2 sets of genes. And if we were to have a magic microscope that allowed us to look at what that looked like on the inside, we would see that your genes would be half from your mom and half from your dad. And importantly, in a diploid organism, that's the same regardless of whether you're a male or you're a female. And you can think of these little X's as chromosomes. So those are just the DNA that you get from your parents that make up your genes. If we were to play this through to the offspring of a parent generation, when a dad and a mom would cross, they would each give half of their genes to each of their offspring, regardless of the offspring's sex. So a male offspring would get half of his genes from his mom and half of his genes from his dad. The same is true for a female offspring. Half mom,